The night Hazel Birkett turned down Daniel Forsythe's proposal, the whole town of Cutter's Bluff heard about it before sunrise. That was the thing about small towns in the Montana Territory. Silence traveled faster than gossip, and gossip traveled faster than horses. By the time the morning bell rang over the mercantile, 3 women had already stopped by the Birkett family's dry goods store to offer their condolences, though nobody could quite agree on whether the condolences were meant for Hazel or for Daniel. Hazel was 26 years old and had a way of carrying herself that made strangers think she was older. It wasn't severity, exactly. It was more like a kind of settled patience, the look of a woman who had already made her peace with certain things and simply got on with living. She had her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn jaw, and she kept her brown hair pinned up so tight during work hours that by evening, when she finally let it down, she felt like a different person entirely. Daniel Forsythe was a perfectly decent man. That was genuinely the nicest thing Hazel had ever thought about him. He had come to propose on a Tuesday, holding his hat with both hands, and Hazel had thanked him sincerely and said no. She didn't dress it up. She didn't make him feel small. She just told him, gently but plainly, that she didn't think she was the right woman for him, and she meant every word. Daniel left looking more relieved than wounded, which told Hazel everything she needed to know about both of them. What the town could not understand, what it spent considerable energy chewing over in the weeks that followed, was why a woman of 26, without a husband and without prospects in a town where prospects were already thin, would say no to a good steady man with his own land. Hazel understood their confusion. She just didn't share it. The dry goods store had belonged to her parents, and when her father's health began to fail 3 years earlier, Hazel had stepped in without ceremony and simply run it. She knew the inventory by feel. She knew which families paid late and which ones never would. She knew to order extra lamp oil before the first frost and to keep lavender sachets near the fabric bolts because Mrs. Haskell would buy 4 every single time without fail. The store was hers in everything but the deed, and she was proud of it in the quiet way she was proud of most things, without needing to announce it. The man arrived on a Wednesday in April, when the mud from the spring thaw still sucked at boots and the mountains to the north still wore their white caps. His name was Corbin Lyle, and he came to Cutter's Bluff not by any design of his own, but because his horse threw a shoe 2 miles outside of town, and the next settlement was another 18 miles past that. He was 31, lean through the shoulders in the way of men who did hard physical work and never thought much about it, with a face that was weathered but not hardened. His eyes were a particular shade of gray that changed in different light, almost green near a window, almost blue under open sky. He walked into Birkett's dry goods looking for horseshoe nails, a length of rope, and ideally some indication that the town's farrier was still in business. Hazel was behind the counter tallying a receipt when the bell above the door rang. "The farrier's on Sutter Lane," she said without looking up. "3rd building past the church, painted red, you can't miss it. He's usually there by 9. There was a pause. "Good morning to you, too," he said. She looked up then. He was standing just inside the doorway, still holding his hat, with the kind of expression that was not quite amusement and not quite offense, somewhere in the honest middle of both. Hazel set down her pencil. "Good morning," she said, and meant it as a correction to herself more than an apology to him. "Are you looking for the farrier?" "Among other things." He stepped further in, glancing around at the shelves. "You've got a good store here." "I know," she said. That surprised him. She could see it, a small, involuntary shift in his expression, like a man recalibrating. Most women, she imagined, would have said thank you. Maybe she should have. But she'd been running this store for 3 years, and she knew it was good, and false modesty had always struck her as a waste of breath. He found the rope himself and brought it to the counter. She found him nails in the right gauge. He asked about lodging, and she told him the Callaway boarding house on the north end of Maine took travelers, that the beds were clean and the breakfasts were real, unlike some places she could name. He thanked her, She made change. He left. She thought that was the end of it. It was not the end of it. The farrier, it turned out, needed to order a part for his equipment that wouldn't arrive for 4 days, and the boarding house had a vacancy, and Cutter's Bluff had a strange, quiet way of drawing people in when they weren't paying attention. Corbin came back to the store the next morning for coffee beans and a tin of sardines, which was an unusual combination that Hazel did not comment on. He came back the day after that for writing paper and a stamp. By the 4th day, she was fairly certain he was coming in without a specific purpose, and she was uncertain how she felt about that. "You're not from here," she said on that 4th morning. It wasn't a question. "No," he said. "Missouri, originally. Been working my way west the last few years." "Doing what?" "Whatever needed doing." He paused. "Fencing, mostly. Some construction. I helped build a church in Wyoming last fall." "Are you a religious man?" "I'm a man who knows how to follow a blueprint," he said. "Whether I believe what gets preached inside afterward is a separate question." She found that she liked that answer. She didn't tell him so. He was not like the men of Cutter's Bluff in ways she kept noticing without meaning to. He asked questions and then actually waited for the answers. He didn't fill silence with noise just because the silence was there. When old Mr. Peabody came in to argue about the price of tobacco, Corbin stepped to the side without being asked and waited, patient as a fence post, while Hazel handled it. After Peabody left, Corbin said, "He does that every time, doesn't he? Every Tuesday and Thursday," she said. "Like clockwork. Do you ever give in?" "No." "Good," he said simply, and then he bought his writing paper and left. The part arrived for the farrier's equipment on a Friday. Corbin's horse would be ready Saturday morning. Hazel knew this because Cutter's Bluff was small enough that she simply knew things. On Friday afternoon, he came in late, close to closing time, and bought nothing. He just stood at the counter and talked to her about Missouri, about the particular quality of light in Montana that was different from everywhere else he'd been, about a dog he'd had as a boy. She didn't talk as much as he did, but she listened in a way that was its own kind of contribution. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, she realized she had not thought about the store inventory in nearly an hour. That had never happened before in her life. When she finally locked the front door and turned the sign, he was still outside on the step, looking up at the sky, which had gone the deep cold purple of a mountain evening. "You leave tomorrow," she said. "My horse will be ready tomorrow," he said. "That's not quite the same thing." She looked at him. "Is there a difference?" He turned then and looked at her directly in a way that was neither bold nor hesitant, just honest, the way he seemed to be about most things. "I don't know yet," he said. "I'm still working that out." She went home and didn't think about it. Or rather, she thought about it constantly and told herself she wasn't. Her younger sister Blythe, who had married at 19 and considered this a moral accomplishment, came for dinner that Sunday and noticed immediately that something was different. "You seem distracted," Blythe said. "I'm tired," Hazel said. "You're never tired. Then I'm thinking about inventory." Blythe set down her fork. "There's a man. There is not a man. There is absolutely a man." Blythe leaned forward with the focused energy of someone who had been waiting for exactly this conversation for 6 years. "Who is he?" "He's a traveler," Hazel said. "He's leaving tomorrow. Travelers don't have to leave. Most of them do." Blythe was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully, the way she approached things she knew Hazel wouldn't like. "You know it's all right to want something, Hazel, even if you're not sure you'll get it." "I want a good inventory count and for the Hendersons to pay their bill," Hazel said. "That is not what I meant, and you know it." Hazel knew it. She slept poorly that night, which was unusual for her. She was, as a rule, a practical sleeper. She lay down, she closed her eyes, she was unconscious within minutes. She had always found her own company restful. That night it wasn't. Monday morning, she opened the store at 7 as always. At 7:15, Corbin Lyle walked in. She looked at him for a moment. "Your horse was ready Saturday." "I know," he said. She didn't say anything. I went back to the boarding house, he said, and I sat down and I started thinking about where I was going next, and I couldn't come up with a good reason to leave. He held her gaze. He had this way of being still that she found, against her better judgment, enormously steadying. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I just wanted to stay a little longer, if that's all right. Hazel considered him for a moment with the same careful attention she gave to difficult accounting problems. Can you lift heavy crates? She said. He blinked. Yes, I have a shipment coming Thursday. 2 men canceled on me, and I haven't found replacements. She turned back to her ledger. I'll pay you fair wages. You can lodge at Callaway's on your own account. It was not the response he had expected, she could tell. But he didn't look disappointed. He looked, if anything, like a man trying not to smile at an inopportune moment. All right, he said. Good, she said. Now, are you buying anything, or are you just taking up space? He bought a bag of coffee beans. That was how it began. Not with declarations, but with unloaded freight and fair wages, and 2 people who were both too honest to pretend they weren't paying attention to each other. The weeks that followed were careful. Hazel was not a reckless person, and she did not become one. Corbin helped with the Thursday shipment and did it well. He knew how to work without being told twice, which she respected more than most people understood. He stayed on at the boarding house. He helped her reorganize the back room, which had been in a state of dignified chaos since her father's illness, and did not once suggest that he was doing her a favor, which meant she could accept it without feeling indebted. They had a habit of talking in the half hour before she closed up, when the day's business was done and the light outside was going gold. He would lean against the far counter and she would be doing some final tidying, and they would talk about whatever came to mind, books they had read, places they had been or wanted to go, the small daily dramas of a small daily town. She learned that he could cook badly and was unembarrassed about it. He learned that she had a sharp, dry sense of humor that she mostly kept to herself, like a good knife she only took out when it was actually needed. She noticed during this time that he never pushed. He gave her room. He let her set the pace of everything without making her feel like he was waiting for her to catch up. For a woman who had spent most of her adult life navigating men who either moved too fast or not at all, it was disorienting in the best possible way. It was Mr. Peabody, of all people, who said it out loud first. He came in on a Thursday, off his usual schedule, which was itself an event, and found Corbin helping Hazel sort a new bolt of wool fabric. They were standing close together, not touching, talking about something with the easy shorthand of people who have been paying attention to each other for a while. Peabody looked at them for a long moment, bought his tobacco without argument for the first time in living memory, and on his way out said to Hazel, with the blunt directness of a man in his 70s who had stopped caring what anyone thought, "Whoever ends up with him is going to be a lucky woman." He left before either of them could respond. The silence in the store afterward was the loudest kind, the kind that is full of something neither person has said yet. Corbin set down the fabric. He didn't look at her immediately. He seemed to be thinking about something. Not calculating, exactly, but choosing. Then he turned and looked at her, and his expression was the most unguarded she had ever seen it. "I think he's right," he said quietly. "I think whoever ends up with me will be lucky." A pause. "Though I could say the same about the man who ends up with you." She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about Daniel Forsythe and his hat in both hands. She thought about her sister's question, "Is it all right to want something?" She thought about inventory counts and lamp oil, and the way this particular man had never once asked her to be less than she was. "Corbin," she said. "Yes." Her voice was steady when she said it, but quiet in a way that was different from her usual quiet, softer and more deliberate, like something she had been thinking about for a while and had finally decided to stop keeping to herself. "I was hoping you meant you." He was still for a moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. Not the polite, socially appropriate smile she had seen him produce for customers and townspeople, but a different one entirely, the kind that seemed to start somewhere behind his eyes. "I did mean me," he said. I just wasn't sure you wanted me to." "I'm sure now," she said. And that was all it took, really. Not a dramatic declaration on a front porch, not a rescue or a crisis or any of the conventional machinery that was supposed to produce love in that part of the world. Just two people in a dry goods store in the Montana Territory, being honest with each other at precisely the right moment. He stayed in Cutter's Bluff. He built a small workshop on the lot behind the store, which everyone in town immediately understood was a permanent arrangement, whether or not the official announcement had been made. By summer, he was doing carpentry work for half the households in the county, which he was good at, and which fit neatly alongside what Hazel was doing, which was running a store that was now visibly thriving. He asked her to marry him on an ordinary Tuesday evening, in the back room of the store, while she was doing inventory. There was no audience, no ceremony of preparation. He just said it plainly, the way he said most things, and looked at her with those gray-green eyes that she had stopped being able to imagine not having around. She set down her pencil. "Yes," she said, "obviously." He laughed, a real laugh surprised out of him, and the sound of it bounced off the shelves and the stacked crates and the bolts of fabric and all the ordinary accumulated evidence of the life she had built, and it struck her, in that moment, that the life she had built had left exactly enough room for exactly this. The wedding was small, which suited them both. Blythe cried, which she had promised she wouldn't. Mr. Peabody came and sat in the back row and didn't argue with anyone about the price of anything, which was his own particular form of respect. And afterward, when they were walking home in the quiet early evening with the mountains going dark against a sky full of stars, Corbin said to her, without preamble, "I should thank old Peabody." "For what?" "For saying it out loud." He glanced at her. "I might have taken considerably longer without him." Hazel considered this. "You wouldn't have," she said. "You were already working up to it." "I could tell." "You could tell?" "I can usually tell," she said. "I just waited to see if you'd get there on your own." He stopped walking and looked at her, and she could see him working through the implications of that, and she let him, the way she let most things settle at their own pace. "So you knew," he said. "I hoped," she said. "It's different." He reached out and took her hand, right there on the empty street, under the Montana stars, and she let him because it was easy by then, as easy as tallying a receipt, as easy as knowing which families would pay late and which ones never would, as easy as every quiet. Certain things she had ever trusted about herself. Some things, it turns out, are worth being patient for. And some people walk into your store on a Wednesday in April, and the whole careful structure of your ordinary life shifts an inch, just 1 inch, and that is enough to change everything, not with noise, not with drama, just with honesty and a little time and two people wise enough to mean what they say.